Written by John Hare and Chris Yates, with the awesome musical maestro Martin Galway, here we have an absolute seminal classic, Whizball, for the Commodore 64. But, and there's always a but, Whizball appears to be one of those games that always seem to divide the audience, depending on whether you took enough time to learn the functionality of the game. I've read from a lot of forums people saying that the game is overrated because they either never understood the hype or couldn't get a grip on the controls or whatever. Sure, it's a very fantastical idea and doesn't involve much real-world physics, but wasn't that one of the basic ideas behind gaming in the 1980s? Interacting with your dreams. You see, the game takes place in the 8 weird and wonderful levels of Wizworld, a once beautiful planet drained of all its colour by the malevolent Zark. As an amiable wizard, you attempt to bring colour back to the world by shooting and capturing floating paint droplets, then mixing the collected primary colours to create each landscape's 3 target colours. However, also infesting each level are Zark's minions, which can be shot to release magic pearls, used to bolt extra firepower and gadgets on the standard Whizball. Most important of these is a mini Whizball carrying a cat, called Nifter, which, as well as being a sort of multiple weapon, is used to catch paint drops. Apart from the 3 primary colours, there are another 5 droplets to collect, some of which have detrimental sort of dark matter effects on your progress, such as the black drops which make the scenery invisible, for example, or the purple drops rendering your cat uncontrollable. Others bestow extra lives, and collecting the grey droplets will give your cat the ability to withstand 128 collisions rather than the cat's usual 9 lives. Going back to these pearls, when you collect these from the dead enemies, you will notice that icons light up on top of the screen, and when you then waggle your joystick, you will activate the icon highlighted. This is where I think a lot of players probably didn't read the manual before playing, and didn't realise how to activate these icons. Maybe. Possibly. But anyway, the most fundamentally paramount skill you need to acquire straight away from these pearls is definitely the anti-gravity ability. This ability will prevent Whizball from bounding around everywhere seemingly uncontrollable, and once you have this power, then the game really starts to begin. So made getting this power a #1 priority every time you begin the game. However, I'll label them all quickly on screen now for reference. The first one, as we know, is the thrust or anti-grav, which provides greater control over your Whizball. The next one is the slap weapon, so that pressing fire will activate beams. You can also toggle this with the double, which splits your firepower in both directions. Now we have your Catellite, whereby holding down the fire button transfers directional control to the cat. Next is Blazes, which is a slightly more powerful blaster to your original weapons. Whiz Spray or Cat Spray is multi-directional firepower for either Whiz or Nifter. The Smart Bomb will destroy everything on screen, including their projectiles, and finally, the Shield. This grants you temporary immunity from enemies and their projectiles. Remember, Nifter, your cat, is the only one able to collect the drops of colour deposited when the colour bubbles are shot. Once fully armed with the power-ups you require, you have to collect red, green and blue drops to restore colour to a level. As mentioned, Wizworld comprises of 8 levels, stacked vertically with connecting holes and tunnels, and each will have either red, blue or green paint, forcing you to move between them if you're going to get enough of each to restore colour on a level. Once you do restore colour, there's a bonus level where all the enemies attack you. Lives can't be lost here, only gained if you shoot enough of them, and once this has been completed, you'll be greeted with a neat animation of Whiz mixing the colours together in a cauldron. Whizball is nothing short of being the work of mad genius really. The scenario and game design are so original that it's almost off-putting at first for some people, and I get it. But it only takes a short time to master controlling the Whizball and cat, and then work out exactly what's going on. Playing this game is an absolute joy, and even after all these years. And there's plenty of entertainment for anyone who's willing to attempt colouring in the landscape. The graphics, sound and general presentation are second to none, and combined with the thoughtful attention to detail and the comprehensive series of game variations, you end up with something rather special. Quite simply put, one of the compulsory games that any self-respecting Commodore 64 owner should have in their collection, and definitely one of the games anyone new to this system should be considering loading up first for sure. Thanks for watching, guys, massively appreciated once again. Hit the like button and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join me on this epic journey revisiting absolute classics just like this. Also, if you enjoyed this game, or maybe it wasn't for you, let me know in the comments. I'll leave you now with John Hare explaining exactly how the game came about, the design of the game, and where the name Nifter came from. I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Until then, bye for now.
With Whizball, the inspiration was Nemesis and Salamander, the arcade machines at the time. They were the latest things with the greatest graphics. And Chris was really into these games. And so the actual flying around stuff was very much inspired by that. The bouncing around part, which happens at the start, is something control system which Chris just invented. And one day I came round to his house and he said, "Look at this, what do you think?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's cool." And I think I ended up making this little green head, which later became Whizball, and that was the art, which needed something which rotated. So we had the rotating head, then we had the things circling at what we call the Catellite. I mean, I really like the controls on Whizball. I like the two-player doing different things, working in cooperation together, because you had the Whizball like this and this satellite that went around it called a Catellite. You could play it in single player, controlling both. You could play it in two-player, and one controlled this and one controlled the satellite, which gave you slightly more ability to do stuff. And then again with the bit that when you collected the paint drops, and then the paint drops were used to mix up paint, and then you can colour the landscape. This is the kind of the idea that I came from, which is what, how can we build this into a world? So we'd have come up with, first of all, with the colouring the landscape idea. And then, okay, these things we're shooting, they could drop colours. I don't really remember how it worked, because Chris and I would just talk. It was so natural, we'd just have a conversation and the idea would come out. Design documents, even the concept of a producer, let alone a design document, it didn't even enter our heads until 1991. They just didn't exist. No one cared, I mean, we did write things. I mean, I was writing loads of stuff on paper to show what things worked out, but in order to get something signed or to prove it, no. We just went with, we went with a running demo of something that looked great, and people said, "That's great, we'll sign it." Because when you're making a really good game, it's an iterative process. Like with Whizball, Chris made a control system. Then we went down the arcade machines and he looked at the way that the flight paths worked and the weapons worked, and we bolted that in. And I'd have been looking at colorization of backgrounds and how that can work. And we'd have worked at stuff, then we'd have put that together, then we'll look at, right, now how do we do the bit about mixing the colour? Oh yeah, let's have a wizard's lab. And that little spinning spaceship, what can we turn it into? Well, Chris had a cat called Nifter. Right, so let's just turn it into a cat. Oh, all right then. This is how the ideas came about. They were not, when you're free from a document, I guess in a limited environment, and bear in mind the massive advantage of the Commodore 64 and the Amiga, the graphics chip did everything for you. You didn't have any of this stuff about managing the world so much. Yes, you had to play tricks with what you could do, but not to the extent now where so much is graphics processor power being taken up. A lot of that was out of the hands of the programmer. Didn't need to worry so much, and the amount of artists was limited. I did all the art on all our early games, right up until Sensible Soccer. It was all my art. So there was no art team. It was me, and I was also by default a co-designer and by default producer.